The next session here at TMRE continued, which is your business recession proof? And we are going to offer you the opportunity to learn from some who have fortified. We've got Kathleen Blum and Christy Schlosser and Dave Mostrovsky from CNR Research, who actually is also one of our sponsors. We've got them here live. We're very excited for the session, and it, of course, is extremely timely. So let's go now live to Is Your Business Recession Proof?
Good morning. I'm Kathleen Blum, and I'm with CNR. Today I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Christy Schlosser and Dave Mostrovsky. They're both VPs of Quantitative Research at CNR. And today we're going to be talking about, is your business recession proof? And we're going to talk about some tips that we can learn from some that are, or at least appear to be, recession proof. So let's jump in. First, a little bit about CNR, since I just introduced ourselves. We are a research company. We are a custom research company specializing in both quantitative and qualitative research. We've been around for over 60 years, and we have over 150 employees, 19 of which are moderators on the qual side, and we have another 45 quantitative analysts. While Shopper is near and dear to my heart as the VP of Shopper Insights, we do have other specialties as well, including business to business, consumer, multicultural, youth and family. So we are a full service custom research house. With that, let's jump into what we have to talk about today regarding recessions. So, recessions are generally defined by an economy that has experienced 2 consecutive growths of negative GDP. This can actually be caused by a variety of factors, anything from economic spikes. So think of spikes in oil prices or the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't think any of us could have predicted that 5 years ago. Financial crisis and panics are also another reason we get recessions. So the Great Recession of 2008, where we really kind of had that excess debt in the housing market, or rapid changes in economic expectations. Think back to 2001. I think all of us are old enough to remember that, when the dot-com bubble burst. Anyways, since the 50s, which you can see on the chart here, recessions have lasted anywhere from 2 to 18 months. Interestingly enough, if you remember during COVID, there was a lot of talk about, is it going to be a U-shaped recession? Is it going to be a V-shaped recession? Look at those big lines in that period of 2020, where you really do see it really was more of a V recession. It kind of went down, came right back up. It was a 2-month recession. The longest recession we had was actually the Great Recession of 2008. And that did last for 18 months. So over the last 70 years, the U.S. has been in official recession less than 15% of all months. So that's the good news. We've generally been expanding more than contracting as an economy. That impact overall has had a negative impact of minus 2.5 compared to the overall expansion, or the average expansion, of plus 25%. Now you may be asking, okay, you've got Q2 here. What's happening in Q3? Well, the government releases 3 different numbers: an advanced estimate, second estimate, and then the final release. So for the third quarter, we've had the original or advanced estimate. The second estimate was released on November 30th. Right now, it's sitting at 2.9 for the third quarter. For the fourth quarter, the forecasts right now are sitting at 2.8. Those have actually come down from being over 4% earlier in the year. So let's talk a little bit about some businesses that maybe have that appearance of being recession resistant. Recessions actually affect all of us in some way. It just recession resistant than other ones. And two areas that really kind of highlight and come to light as looking like they're recession resistant are necessities and value vices. So when you think of necessities, these are the things that, we need every day, staples, food, that type of thing. And many of these companies, not only do we feel we can't live, but remember, there can also be the perception. You can create the perception of being something that shoppers and consumers can't live without. So think about things like repair services are also very attractive during times of economic downturn. It's less expensive to repair something than to buy something new. And pet food, I always find an interesting one because many shoppers have the adage of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Reason why is if you've ever had a pet and you try to change their food too quickly, you'll never do it again. As for value vices, when things are bad, we like some type of comfort, but we may not be able to afford those more expensive comforts like going out to restaurants or things that we might have done in the past. So value vices are a way to give us that comfort and reminder of something good to kind of relieve that discomfort we might be feeling, but in a less expensive way. So here, sin categories, alcohol, yes, it does pretty well. So does gambling, because people start to think, well, maybe I could win it big and I can kind of get myself out of this. So they dream big. And while restaurants, people do stop going to those, not the QSR. So it gives them a reason to go to that quick serve restaurant and still enjoy a meal out, not have to do dishes, cooking, but without the expense of your normal, more expensive restaurant. Couple interesting facts I did want to share with you too about recessions. Three Musketeers and Snickers were actually developed during the 1930s depression. Again, people are looking for something to comfort them. Now, hopefully we don't go back to anything like the 1930s depression, but interesting that even back then, people turned to some type of comfort. And during the Great Recession, which isn't that long ago, beauty salons grew by more than 14%. So when you think about it, we all want to look good, but how many of us are really skilled at cutting our hair? So even though companies may have necessities or value vices, that isn't a guarantee that they're going to do well during a recession. It may help, but they need to really stay aware of what's happening in the market, the reason behind the recession, so that they can really prepare themselves. And in the next few sections, we're going to talk about 3 different strategies that companies can use to prepare themselves. First is prepare a game plan. Develop a contingency plan or alternative scenarios ahead of time. Don't wait until it's here on top of us. Think ahead and plan ahead. Stay true to your brand. We want to ride through a downturn in the economy, but still be ready to grow when the economy and that recession is over. In order to do that, you have to think about the short and long term. That means you need to be true to your brand DNA before, during, and after a recession. And then manage finances wisely. Companies that are highly leveraged with a lot of debt are more vulnerable. There may be a downturn in sales. And if you have a lot of debt, this is going to limit your ability to ride through that. It's also going to limit your ability to invest in some of the things you need to continue doing, like research and understanding how shopper and consumers are reacting to the economy. Marketing to make sure that they still know about your brand and what your brand values stand for, as well as technology, which is more and more becoming a necessity. I think all of us would agree. I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm blind if my power goes out or I'm without my phone and my battery has gone down too far. So think of recessions as an exercise in change management. To really navigate one successfully, a company needs to be flexible and ready to adjust. With that, I'm now going to turn it over to my partner in crime here, Dave. And Dave will take us through preparing a game plan.
Thanks, Kathleen. I think the first step in preparing is to create a focused game plan to anticipate and minimize your biggest risks ahead of any actions that happen, as Kathleen mentioned, and minimize that damage from recession. So it's a little easier to do if we think about the risks of recession coming from three possible directions. Go ahead, Kathleen. Yeah. The first risk is category exodus, when we're talking about customers leaving the category entirely, or perhaps the flow of new customers into a category. We anticipate that happening when we're not going to see new customers coming in. The second risk is a little bit different, is when our current customers may keep buying our product, but they reduce the amount of their consumption. If we anticipate that, what can we do ahead of time to mitigate that? The third risk, of course, is when customers switch their purchases to a competitive brand and understanding the risks that are possibly there. So understanding exactly what forces of risk are at work and in what ways, just in this basic way, can help us create a focused game plan. Let's talk specifically about what that means. When we're talking about category exodus, there are a lot of things, and it's an exhaustive list, and I won't go through everything. But let me give you a few examples to figuring out ahead of time why consumers might be leaving or why new users might not be coming in. For example, if we anticipate that the category is about to fall out of trend or it's going to stop being used in the way that it once was, and we understand that through talking to consumers, talking to businesses, and reading the marketplace. We may be talking about a game plan that includes revising the value proposition for the whole category. Maybe something more close to home is if we might be looking at a situation in which users in the category are shifting their purchases to an adjacent category, or new purchases are coming into the broader category to an adjacent category. I think a great example of this is the recent rise of hard seltzer, along with, as opposed to the light beer category. In that case, it might indicate a need to think ahead of that trend, to start thinking about innovation or marketing so that consumers can find our brand in other categories. Another example of exodus would be related to changes in fundamental changes in the retail channel in which consumers find the category. Certainly, we saw that in pandemic times, but in recession, that sometimes becomes a real factor, and we need to understand, are they going from brick and mortar to online to delivery, and understanding a game plan and thinking about the way that we get our product to customers and consumers and how they engage with the category. Now, the second recession risk bucket that we have is reduced consumption. And if that's the case, if we expect that category to contract in terms of where we're going, one of the first things we need to understand are basic shopper dynamics, like are shoppers making fewer shopping trips, or are they likely to make smaller purchases? And having a plan to go to create a game plan that drives more frequent trips or the size of basket rings. And sometimes it's different with different audiences. Now, certainly in a recession, we see reduced consumption that has to do with pricing. And of course, this is a time to really understand your price elasticity and the trends that go, and keep a thumb on that, because we might want to have a plan that's focused on managing price thresholds. And also, we think of that contraction, we think of it broadly across all audiences, but we definitely want to understand in reduced consumption, is it everybody, or is there a profile of consumers who are most prone to cutting back, and why? And so it's important that we prepare ourselves to engage in a strategy that is focused on that group and without cannibalizing other audiences by giving away promotions or marketing that cannibalize your sales. The third potential source of risk comes from consumers choosing to switch, of course. If we see our consumers becoming less loyal in recessionary times and choosing other brands, our first priority is to get a handle on exactly why those consumers are switching. There's no easier way than talking to people who have switched and diagnosing what the most prominent reasons are, and create targeted game plans that are only expected to get worse in recessionary times. As part of that, we'll want to get a sense of what brands or even what specific SKUs pose a threat to us, maybe leading us to consider things like war game exercises to simulate actions that we're going to need to take to counter the competition ahead of the time that we actually have to do that, and having a plan in place. And finally, we want to profile which of our customers are most vulnerable to switching brands, who is on the cusp, and what messages, what products, what innovations do we need to get to them to counter that switching behavior. So these are just a few examples of the many angles that we can come in from. But I think the most important takeaway is that ahead of that recession hitting, we need to stay vigilant about where those threats are going to come from, and not think of it as a large blanket. We have to get all hands on deck on everything, and put out the biggest fires first. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Christy, who's going to talk a little bit about staying true to your brand.
Thanks, Dave. So Kathleen told you a little bit about what makes a recession happen, and Dave spoke about some of the strategies to get yourself prepared. What I want to talk about is the underlying aspect of who you are as a brand and how to keep that alive before, during, and after a recession. A lot of the examples I'm going to talk about today are QSR related, partially because that's my area of expertise, and also because it's one of the industries that Kathleen mentioned before that tends to do a little bit better during a recession. But a lot of these examples and the strategies can be carried over into any industry, whether it's retail, CPG, manufacturing. So the first thing I want to talk about is staying true to your brand values to make sure that you recover quickly after a recession. So a recession is really not the time that you want to be making fundamental changes to who you are as a brand. So your purpose, your vision, your brand image, all those things that you have on your website that you say, this is who we are as a brand. You want to be maintaining those, you want to be sticking by those, and you want to continue to support the things that you do as a brand that are part of those vision and values. So like I said before, who you are as a brand should stay the same throughout that recession and afterwards. So what that means is you want to keep up with things you're doing in the community, whether it's charity involvement, whether it's community activities, the things that you are doing that kind of maintain your ties to the community or charitable involvement. It can be easy, maybe not easy, but it can be tempting during a recession to cut back on those kinds of things due to financial pressure, like giving back or donating. But this is the time when consumers are going to notice it the most, because consumers are feeling that financial pressure too. So they're going to notice if you are not continuing the same types of charitable giving you've been doing. During the heart of the pandemic, a survey saw that over half of Americans said they're more likely to buy from a company that gives to charities or is associated with causes that they believe in. So they actually really want to see that kind of giving. So a great example here is Feeding America. This is something that a lot of corporations are involved in. They provide meals to over 40 million Americans. And so what we see is that this is a really strong way that corporations can give back. And it's something that continues to show who you are as a brand and lets consumers see that you're still stepping up and maintaining your corporate values, even though the economy is maybe not as strong as it used to be. Another important thing to keep in mind, a recession is a time when a lot of brands or corporations want to streamline their product offerings or their SKUs. This makes a lot of sense. Streamlining your SKUs, streamlining your products is a great way to save operationally, but you want to make sure you do it in a way that maintains your core brand DNA. So you don't want to focus on everything. You don't want to keep doing all the same products and SKUs you've done before, but you want to make sure you focus on the key traffic driving SKUs at the same time. So if you're doing a SKU or product rationalization, make sure that you're not just picking things arbitrarily or using your gut instinct. I know that sounds crazy, but believe me, I've seen it happen. So look at your financial analytics, your shopper analytics, your research. keep in the products that are really drawing in customers the most, and cut those that are going to help your operations. And we'll look at an example in just a second. But it's important to also maintain your product innovation pipeline during this time. Again, that seems a little counterintuitive. I'm cutting SKUs, I'm cutting products, I'm trying to save money, but I should also keep innovating and keep developing new products. The reason for that is because you want to maintain that differentiation from your competitors, and you want to keep drawing in new consumers, new customers to your brand. And the way to do that is very often through product innovation. So a great example of this is with McDonald's and their COVID menu cuts. Right after lockdown started in March, April 2020, McDonald's cut dozens of items from their menus. They cut a lot of breakfast items, oatmeal, bagels, they cut grilled chicken, salads, dozens of items. It made a lot of news, but it was actually really good for them. So their margin jumped over 2 percentage points in the first couple of months that they did this. And most importantly, their drive-through wait time dropped by about 30 seconds. And this was at a time, if you'll remember, the only place any of us could go was the drive-through. So everyone was going to the drive-through. All the Door Dashers were going to the drive-through. So this was a big win for them operationally and financially. But they didn't stop with the innovation or the differentiating products. So they didn't forget their most buzzworthy item, which was the McRib. And they did their first nationwide relaunch of the McRib in October 2020. It's the first one they'd done in over 8 years that was nationwide. So they made sure to continue with that differentiation of products that they know drive in traffic. And the last thing I want to hit on, Dave mentioned this idea of price and looking at price elasticity. And we know that people's wallets are tight during a recession, and corporations' wallets are tight too. So how can you offer value to your guests, to your customers, without getting into a price war with your competitors that no one really wants to be in, but also without degrading your brand equity and upsetting your customers? So the two knee-jerk reactions that we tend to see a lot in a recession are either brands want to slash prices so that they can steal share from competitors. That's how you end up in a price war that you really don't want to be in. Or you start taking price rapidly and at increasingly higher rates to try and recover margin the most. So what happens there is people try and upset their customers, or you're upsetting your competitors, and it tends to get a little, it gets out of control pretty quickly in terms of the prices. So what you do want to do instead is try and find unique ways to message value that are separate from price. In other words, don't let price be the only thing that matters. So what we have seen in the QSR space, which again can apply to a lot of different industries, what are extras that you can provide to your customers along with your core product offering? So this may be samples, it might be extra features or services, maybe it's free delivery, maybe it's a white glove service of some kind. In QSR, we've seen a lot of bundles that started getting offered around the time of the pandemic that continue to be very popular. Here's a picture of a Burger King family bundle. These are core products they already have on the menu. They just bundled them together, took a little bit of a discount, and suddenly they've increased average ticket price when people order these. Another solution is the rewards or loyalty approach. So we see people boost traffic when they give customers that sense of value when they're really just ordering normal priced items. And then finally, staking a claim on aspects of your brand or your core brand proposition that are not price related. So what is it about your product or your brand that draws people in that you offer that is different from price? So what is your core brand value proposition? For example, Chick-fil-A really stakes their brand value proposition on good service. They're not the lowest price QSR out there, but they offer value through great service. So those are just a few ways to maintain your brand identity and your brand value proposition during a recession. I'm going to turn it back over to Kathleen now, and she's going to talk about managing your finances wisely through a recession, and then she will wrap us up.
All right, thank you, Christy. So let's talk a little bit about managing our finances. To start off with, I'd like to tell you a quick story. So in early 2000, there was a 5-year-old online book sold. seller. They sold well over 600 million in convertible bonds to shore up its financial position. 1 month later, that's when the dot-com bubble burst, and many digital startups were left going out of business, not existing. This company actually would have been one of those victims had they not thought ahead and actually improved their financial situation. So when you think about it, and you're probably guessing, so let me tell you what that company is. Yes, it is Amazon. And had they not had that foresight, they could have been a victim. But because they raised money before the recession, they were able to absorb those losses in investments that other startups just could not afford. And they were able to then invest and market other things like their third-party seller platform, expand to new markets and to new segments. So this just goes to show what the strength of having a strong financial and why it is so important. And as you think about it, if you do have that higher level of debt, it can quickly spiral out of control. It actually limits a business's ability to effectively operate, market, and sell its products. This can then lead to some of those knee-jerk decisions that Christy was alluding to. And those can not only hurt the brand, they can hurt the employees, the morale of the company, and the business ultimately. So you want to make sure that you keep a strong financial position right in the storm so that you have the ability to ride through the short term and really grow in the long term. And this also allows you to really invest where you need to in research, understanding those shopper behaviors. How is the economy changing that? Marketing your brand and your values, really giving that differentiating and something that resonates with the shopper. And also looking at technology. How can you really improve efficiencies, cost, and ultimately that customer experience? So you really want to focus on the shopper, branding, quality, and enhancing that experience in the short and long term when you're thinking about a downturn in the economy. And just a few things here. You do have our emails if you'd like to get in touch with us and ask more questions about this or anything else. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Seth.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, Dave, and Christy. Great content there. So let's get to a question or two. And we do have one here, and it relates to the innovation piece. You mentioned early on that Snickers were introduced many moons ago, and that there was the this questioner conflates the McDonald's innovations from the pandemic, and just putting your thumb down on the fact that even in a recession, or especially in a recession, that's a time to innovate. And let me open that up to the three of you.
It's definitely a time to innovate. You don't want to rest on your laurels. This is not the time to do it. You want to be judicious about how you innovate, but listening to what those shoppers are looking for. I think, the example of Snickers and Three Musketeers, great example of, people were feeling very uncomfortable. They wanted some type of comfort. That was a very small comfort, something to give them a little bit of pleasure during that time. And I'll let Christy talk a little bit more to the innovation in QSR.
Yeah, absolutely. I think McDonald's especially did it in a really smart way. We did see reductions in full innovation in the QSR space. Obviously, I was in the space at that time. No one was doing taste tests because we couldn't figure out how to do taste tests in QSR during a pandemic. So there was definitely a reduction in new products, but there was a lot of shifting of what do we kind of have on our back burner? What have we already developed? How can we Frankenstein some stuff together that maybe we tried in the past and it didn't quite work, but maybe we can shuffle it and throw it out there. There was a lot of risk taking, actually, which was very surprising, that we saw things that maybe didn't quite meet our thresholds of success during testing, but you know what, we're going to toss it out there because what's happening during a recession, and I sort of use COVID as a recession. It wasn't technically an economic recession, but consumers behaved in a lot of ways that were recessionary. So a lot of risk taking in terms of you trying to get every bit of traffic or every bit of customer purchase that you possibly can. And so anything you can do that draws them to your brand is going to be helpful. So anything that is new or novel is going to be fantastic.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Kathleen, Christy, Dave. Very much appreciate your time. Thanks, of course, to CNR for sponsoring TMRE Continued.